Hello everyone, I'm Shalini Sheetal from She Coders in ITR, and today we are going to explore the third topic in our series of Python tutorials, and it is going to be about control statements in Python. So we are familiar with indentation, right? In Python, spacing primarily indicates a block, the scope of a block. Spacing is primarily used to indicate a scope. We don't use any type of parentheses or curly braces or any kind of brackets to denote a scope. It is simply the indentation which specifies the scope of a block in Python. So that is what is going to be of great use in conditional statements now. There are many types of conditional statements, first of all, namely if, or it can be if and else together combined, or it can be if and else. Now, one thing to remember that in Python we don't have else if. It is commonly called together as elif. So remember, if you write else if in Python, it will give you a syntax error. It will not recognize what you are trying to explain. So remember to use elif in Python and not the usual else if in C or C++. Now there can also be an if else ladder or a nested if else. What these statements or these abbreviations mean, we are going to explore them in this video. So if basically means that we check some condition, right? If something is true, then we do something, otherwise another thing. So basically we need to check if that the condition is true or not, and according to that we take the steps. And in Python, one thing to remember is that everything is true except namely seven prominent things, which of them are 0 or the um, variable false or none or the empty character. It's not a space. Space is considered as true, remember. It signifies something. Space is a valid character. So the null character or nothing. It's just a null character, and empty curly braces, empty square brackets, or empty parentheses. These seven things are considered false in Python, otherwise, everything is true. Any other thing in Python is true except 0, false, none, empty character, empty braces, empty parentheses, and empty square brackets. You must keep this in mind. So these keywords false and none are considered as false in Python. Except them, everything is true. Now let us get familiar with the syntax of if in Python. So first of all, we check if the condition is true or not. So if the condition, then the statements under that if are executed. Remember to put a colon and then everything after the indentation come under the if block. That is why I said that indentation is important. We revise that concept here first of all. So everything under the if statement with an indentation next to that of if are considered under the if condition, and all those will be executed under that. So here we have first of all taken A as 99. Now we next check if A is greater than equal to 95 or not. If it is, then you get awarded with an award and we print award. So since A here is 99, the condition here is true and hence award is printed. If we would have taken A something like 40, which is less than 95, then nothing would have been printed because the if condition becomes false here then and it is not executed. So next we check for a string. This is not empty. This is not false. I said anything above the above seven things are true in Python, right? So since this is true, the print statement is executed and we obtain Python is awesome. Now as I said again, 0 is false. So the if condition evaluates to false here and the print statement is not executed. It won't give any output here. Now, whereas 1 is considered true, it is a valid character which is considered as true in Python, and as a result, hey is printed. Now, I have already said that the null character, which is nothing in Python, is considered as false. So, this statement is not executed. But remember, space is true. It is a valid character in Python. It has an ASCII value associated with it. And as a result, how are you will be printed if it is a space. Whereas if it is left as empty, nothing would be printed because that is considered as false by Python. Now, nextly, we explored the syntax of if-else statement. The first part is true, similar to the syntax of if, and then next we check for the else part. The statements below the else part will be executed only if the if condition evaluates to false. If the if condition is true, then only the above statements will be executed and the else part won't be executed. But if the condition evaluates to false, then the else part shall be executed. This shall become with a more clear with an example. Now, suppose let us assume that the marks obtained are 95 by some student. Now, nextly we check if that the marks are greater than or equal to 95. We print excellent, otherwise we print average. Now, since it 95 is greater than or equal to 95, the output obtained here evaluates to excellent. Now, remember, if we take something less than 95, then the else part shall be executed and we obtain average because this is the part which is executed in this case. Now, if else can be used to find which number is greater among any two numbers. Suppose we take the first number as 442 and the second number as 331. Then clearly the first number is greater, right? How do you execute it as a Python program? We use the if statement and check that if number 1 is greater than number 2, then we print that num1 is greater. Remember string formatting? Formatting is used here. Anything within the curly braces will be considered as a variable instead of a direct string. So num1 is greater than num2 and hence we obtain num1 is greater in this case. If it would have been the vice versa case, then we would have executed the else part and instead printed num2. Now let's explore the syntax of if, elif, else. As I have already said, Python doesn't have something as else if. It is elif instead. We just combine else and if together and write it as elif. Elif is the keyword here and not else if is to be used. So first of all, we check if one condition is true, the required condition, then the statements under if shall be executed. Else, we check for another condition and see if that condition evaluates to true, then the statements under the elif block shall be executed. Now, one thing to remember that any number of elif blocks can be used. You can check for as many conditions as you like to. And lastly, we put the else condition, which is not permanent, not compulsory. If you want, you can put it the else statement. Otherwise, you can skip it entirely. If you want to execute a significant number of steps after all the conditions evaluate to false, then you can use the another else block and put the statements under that. Now, suppose we want to put a grade system, right? Suppose we want to check what the child has obtained as the grade. Then we first check if marks are greater than 95, we put it as A. L if we check that the marks lie between 80 and 95, then we print B. Otherwise, if the marks lie between 70 and 80, we print C, else we print D. Now, AND is a valid keyword in Python. Instead of using the ampersand sign, you can use AND. And both the conditions evaluate to true, only then the elif block shall be executed. So, if none of the conditions suffice, then ultimately the else block is printed. Here the marks is 86, which satisfies the second condition of being between 80 and 95. So the final grade is obtained as B here. Now, another thing which we haven't covered yet is how do we take an input from user in Python? In C++, we can use cin, and in C, we can use scanf. But in this case, if you want To take an input from the user, you can simply write input, enter a number, and Python will ask for an input from you, and you can take it as anything. Suppose we take it as 4, then we print A, and automatically A is assigned the value of 4. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you take an input in Python, then by default it takes the input as a string value. As you can see here, the type of A is considered string, but if we instead we entered a number, right? So it should be an integer value. So you have to explicitly mention the type of variable you are trying to take an input. So if we use instead an int and enclose the input statement within parentheses and then check for type of A, then now it will be an integer. Suppose we take as 5 and then check its type, it will be an integer. So remember, if you are taking an integer value or a float value, you have to explicitly mention its type. Otherwise, Python assumes it to be a string. Now let us explore and program using if, elif and else to find the greatest among three numbers. We have already found the greater between two numbers. Now for three numbers we have to use an elif as well. The first condition we check is that if the first number is greater than both the second and third number. We have entered all the three values first of all. Then we check if the first number is greater than the other two. If not, we see if the second number is greater than the third or not. And if that is not the case as well, then naturally by default the third number would be the greatest. You can run a any dry run a case and check for yourself. This is what will always be true, provided all the three numbers are distinct. Now, the same format lies to check the greatest among four numbers as well. We first see if the first number is greater than the rest of the numbers and then check for the second number if it is greater than third and fourth number. The third number greater than the fourth number or not. If all the conditions evaluate to false, then the fourth number is the largest. Now, suppose we have grade system and then we calculate the average of five subjects first of all and then check if the average is greater than 85, then we assign it as A, otherwise B if between 75 and 85 and so on. So suppose we asked the numbers obtained by a student in all the five subjects and we entered them according to that. Suppose we have asked the marks of English. Supports it's 97. Maths it's 99. Hindi 75. Computer science it's 90. And SST it's 56. Then if you check for the average of its value and it will surely lie between 75 and 85. Hence grade B has been assigned to it. So you can use this program if you want to calculate the percentage or grade of any student, and this is how an else if ladder would come into practice. Now what if we want to check if a character entered is a vowel or a consonant? So first of all we take an input. We don't need to write int or string here because by default we need a string in this case and Python will take it as a string. So we convert it into lower, which should be easier for us since we don't have to check for capital and small letters separately. And this strip is used if by mistake some user inputs a space value by mistake. So it will strip off of all the space values and just give you the character entered. Now next we check if the entered character lies in this list. In is a membership operator here. It will check if C lies in V or not. V is a list here consisting of all the vowels and this if statement will check if the entered character lies in this list or not. If yes, then it will print that it is a vowel, otherwise it will definitely be a consonant. This is an interesting case of a nested else if program, and you can try it out on yourself and check what shall be the output of this program. You can replace the trues with false and false with true and check for yourself. This will strengthen your understanding of if, and else in Python. So try this out for yourself. Nextly, we shall learn about loops in Python. You must be familiar with for loops, while loops either in C or C++. If not, we shall be exploring them here. We shall understand what each of them is clearly. So first of all, let us look at the syntax of the while loop. Loops are something which will evaluate again and again and again. So you don't have to write the code repeatedly. Instead of repeating the same piece of code for as many times you want to evaluate, you can simply mention the number of times you want to evaluate the loop inside the conditions of the loop, and the same statement of code shall be repeated as that many number of times. So the syntax is as follows. You first mention while and then again the condition, and then put a colon here similar to if, and under the condition, while condition, you put all the statements you want to execute. Remember to increment or decrement the loop variable accordingly. If you leave the loop variable as such, then it shall result in an infinite loop, and you shall run into a very big problem. Your system might crash, it when the Jupyter notebook might hang, and it will not be very pretty. So remember to increment or decrement the loop variable accordingly. For example, in this case, we first take C as 1, and then we check if the value is of C is less than equal to 10 or not. And for as long as the value of C remains under 10, then we print hello. And here, the most important step here is to increment the value of C accordingly. In each execution of the loop, the value of C is incremented and then it is printed hello. See here, the value of C is first of all 1 and then hello is printed. Then it goes to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. And once it becomes 10, this is the last time the loop shall be executed, and then when it becomes 11, the loop no more shall be executed. If you try to find out the value of the variable C at the end of the loop, as you can clearly see, the value of C at the end is 11 and the loop is no more executed, because the while loop run as long as the value of C is less than equal to 10. The same thing is used here. We have first taken C here as 100, but instead of incrementing it, we have instead decremented here. So this loop will print all the values from 100 till 1 with one separation at each. So basically these are all the numbers backward counted from 100 to 1. The point to be noted here is that the value of C is decremented here, and as soon as it becomes 0, the loop execution stops. So as I have clearly said, never forget to update the counter inside loop. You simply cannot write while 9 and print she coders. If the value of uh, condition always evaluates to true, it will run into an infinite loop and it will create a huge problem for you. So always remember to update the counter. Now, for example, in this case, the condition here is false. It will always be false no matter what, because it does not signify anything. It is a value which is taken as false by Python. So this Python tutorial string will never be printed since the starting condition here is false. Now, how do we print a multiplication table of any number using while loop? So first of all, we take the input of a number we want to print the multiplication table of, and then we take another counter variable, initialize it to 1, and then check that as long as the counter variable is less than equal to 10, we print the multiple of the required number and then increment the counter variable. So in this case, for example, we take the input as 5 here, then the counter variable gradually is 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and up till 10. And as soon as it becomes 11, the loop execution stops. Now this is something to check. Iterate a list and check if the size of the string is 4 or not. We print only those strings here which have the length of 4, otherwise skip or ignore the string completely. So basically we are traversing the loop up till the counter variable is less than the length of the list. Here len specifies that the length of list is the borderline up to which the loop shall be executed, and only when the length of the element in list is 4 we print it, otherwise we skip it, and accordingly the counter variable is incremented inside the loop and we traverse the entire list one by one. This is another example. To find the sum of all the numbers present in a list, we have initialized a variable, counter variable as 0 first of all, another variable to keep track of the running sum of the list, and then we run the loop until and unless the counter variable is less than the length of the list, and then keep on adding each list item to the temporary variable, and ultimately we print the value of temp variable. As you can clearly see, it is same as finding out the sum of the list, and the results obtained in both the cases are same. Now the while loop can also be interestingly used to find the reverse of an integer number. Suppose we take an input of a number first of all by specifying it as int explicitly, then we take an other two variables which shall come into use later, and this is the program which will actually reverse an integer number. If you make a dry run with any specific number, you take it as input and then print the value of these variables at each step and check for yourself, it will ultimately give out the reverse of the number. Basically, we are doing modulo by 10 and separating the digits from the units place one by one, and then we are making another number by multiplying it with 10 and adding the remainders in each case. So the reverse of the number is obtained by this case. Now, this is a subpart of another bigger program to check of if a number is palindrome or not. If a number is equal to the reverse of itself, then it shall be called as a palindrome. So basically, we first find out the reverse of the number inputted, and then we check if both the numbers, the reverse and the number which is taken as input, are same or not. If that is the case, then that number is a palindrome. Suppose in this case we have taken as 555, so clearly the reverse is same as the number, so it is a palindrome. But if we would have taken as something different, suppose 67, then 67 is not same as 76, and as a result it is not a palindrome. Now what if we want to check if a number is prime or not? First of all, we take an input, integer input, and then take a flag to check if the number is prime or not. It will be set to 1 or 0 basically according to that. So we check from 2 to that number, we explore all the numbers and see if that the number which is taken as input is divisible by any of them. If that is the case, then naturally that is not a prime number. It has a divisor other than 1 and itself, so it is not a prime number. If not, then we initialize the value of flag as 1, which implies that the number is prime. So ultimately we check if the value of flag is 0, then it is non-prime, indicating that the value of inputted is divisible by some number which lies between 2 and itself, and we break at that moment, and then we print that the number is non-prime. If that is not the case, then we print that the number is prime itself. Now we can also write the same program without using the flag. What happens here is that first we run the loop from 2 to up till that number, 1 before that number, and then we check that if any of those numbers clearly divide the number which is taken as input, then that is non-prime, right? And then we break out of the loop at that moment, printing that the number which is taken as input is non-prime. Now, what if we never execute this break statement? What if the while loop is executed completely? Only then the else part shall be executed. This else part shall not be executed if we break out of the while loop somewhere in between. If this break is executed, then this else part shall not be executed. This else shall only be executed if the while loop is run completely and this break statement is not executed. So the same program can be written without using a flag statement as well. Now let us come into the syntax of the for loop. Now, similar to the syntax of for loop in C, we first take a variable and then specify the range it lies in. Remember to take the ending point of the range always as 1 greater, because if you specify it as 1 and num, the loop shall run from 1 up till num minus 1. So if you take it as plus 1, only then the loop shall run from 1 till num, till the number you have taken as input. So always remember to specify the upper hand limit as 1 greater than what you wish the loop to run up till. So in this case, we have taken fact as 1 and we repeatedly multiply it with all the numbers in the range from 1 up till that number and ultimately print the factorial of that number. Similarly, you can print the Fibonacci series as well. You take two variables as 0 and 1 first of all. Fibonacci is basically a series where each term is the sum of the previous two terms. So you mention the number of terms you want and then take two variables as 0 and 1 and run the for loop in range of 1 and the number which is entered. So plus 1 is taken as an extra so that the for loops run up till the number and which is taken as input, and then we print the current value of b and then change the values of a and b accordingly, taking b as the value of the sum of previous two values and a as the previous value of b. Nextly, we have another method to check if a number is prime or not. Any number which doesn't have a divisor up till its square root is necessarily a prime number. You can use induction to prove it or any other mathematical way, but always remember if a number does not possess any divisor up till its square root, then that number must be a prime number, because clearly if it has two divisors which are greater than its square root, then the product of those two numbers will clearly be greater than the required number, right? Suppose we have 49. It is not a prime number. It has 7 as its square root. So what if it would have been a prime number and we take two numbers which are greater than its square root, suppose 8 and 9, then 8 into 9 is 72, which is much greater than to 49. So one of its divisors must be less than the square root and the other greater than it. So if we want to minimize the time complexity, if we want to run our program to run faster, you can use this condition instead and check up only up till the square root of the number. So in this case, we have printed all the prime numbers between 1 and 1000. So basically there are 169 prime numbers in that range. You can analyze the program a bit more, and we have used the square root function from the math library here, which directly gives us the square root of the number and taken as input. Now the for loop can be minimized when used for a list. This is known as list comprehension. Let us look at it. Suppose we have first of all taken a list as this many numbers, and we then take another list which is empty. Now nextly we check for any variable which is present in the first list consisting of all those numbers only if it is even, that is divisible, not divisible by 2, right? If it would have been divisible by 2, the remainder would have been 0 and it would have been even. But here we check that this condition is true or not, and only then we append it to the second list. So here we check for all those numbers which are odd and only then we append it to the second list. So as you can clearly see, this list consists only of odd numbers from the previous list. This would have been much simpler instead of using a for loop, in the traditional way, we can simply write it as one statement in this way. This is the shorter form of the above loop, and we take the variable for the same variable in list only if variable is not divisible by 2. Has the same meaning as the above block of statements. So we append the variable in L1 only if it is not divisible by 2. And as you can clearly see, L1 has the same value in this case as well. Now, suppose let us get familiar with the random library now. We take any random integer between 1 and 100. Suppose in this case, we now first of need to import it and then take any random integer. We obtain as 36 here, and you can do the same thing instead of using random.randint. You can directly import randint and take another number. And suppose we want to print any 50 in 100 integers between 1 and 50, then this is the syntax you shall use, right? You first run the loop for 100 times and then print any random integer between the range, lying between the range of 1 and 50. So these are any random 100 integers lying between 1 and 50. This can again be simplified using list comprehension, as we take any random integer lying between 1 and 50 and append it for 500 times in this case. To simplify, you can use 100 times and then print L, and you obtain any random integers lying between 1 and 50 and 100 of them in this list. And if you check, the length of L is 100 now. Similarly, you can append 1 10 times in this list and 1 for a variable in the range of 10, and 1 is appended 10 times as a result to this list. Similarly, you can check for even numbers as well and take on the append that value only if remainder is obtained as 0. Same thing can be improvised here with the string as well. You don't necessarily need to take an integer value in list comprehension. You can also use hi, hello, she coders, Python, apple, ball, anything you want to. Now, this is the general syntax: true if condition and or else the false condition, and then the loop. Now, suppose we want to keep track of the weekdays and weekends in the list, then we have first of all taken all the weekdays in one list, and then we use list comprehension to check which day is a weekend or which a weekday. So first we take another list as L1 and specify as weekend if the first character here is S, because clearly in the list of weekdays only the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, have the starting characters as S in them, otherwise it shall be a weekday. So if the first character in the element of the list is S, then it shall be a weekend, otherwise it shall be a weekday. The else condition is mentioned here, and all we need to loop through is for any random variable in the given list. So this is the loop here, this is the else condition here, and this is the if condition. And as you can clearly see, we obtain weekend only for Saturday and Sunday, and the rest values are weekdays. So now let us analyze a quite complicated program consisting of ifs and fors in this, and try for yourself to write the same using list comprehension. First, and try to analyze what this program does, and then I shall explain you later. Pause the video and try for yourself. So basically, what this program does is that for every element in this list, it loops through each element of the list, and then it loops through each character in that list and checks if that consists of a vowel or not. What this v dot split indicates is that it gives a list consisting of all the vowels here, because by splitting at the commas, we obtain different elements as A, E, I, O, U in the list. So, what this checks is that if a vowel is present in each element of the list or not. If it is, then it appends the word to the new list, otherwise, it simply ignores it. So I hope the concepts are quite clear. It was relatively a shorter lecture. Control statements are very simple in Python. The more you practice, the more shall you improve. So these are some random games you can try for yourself using while and if else statements. This is a program using which you can first take a random integer which is saved in the computer, and then you can ask your user to input the any random number, and at the end you will get hints to whether to move down or move up, and ultimately you check if you entered the right number or not. The similar mechanism lies between rock, paper, and scissors as well. First, we specify the win pairs here, and then the user inputs his choice, whether rock, paper, or scissor, and accordingly, you check with the random value allotted by computer and see if the user wins or loses. So try for yourself, and if you have any doubts, then feel free to contact me in the WhatsApp group. I shall be more than happy to clear them. Thank you. Have a great day ahead.